podcast. Hell yeah, brother. Overload, brother.
Beats by @Smoke M2D6.
Welcome to another episode of Seattle Overload. We're going to be looking at the rest of the draft class. If you missed it, make sure you check out our live reaction pieces. Not sure if they kind of worked, but I think there was still a good listen. We had some good takes. We had some bad takes. But we're going to finish up looking at the day 3 guys because we didn't live react to day 3. That would have taken a while to edit and cut up, and I had to sleep at some point. And then we're going to sort of think about the draft as it has settled. I say we because, as ever, I'm joined by Griffin, Spin Move, and Ty, Dane, Gonzalez. Lads, how are we doing? Griff first.
Doing okay. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well, Griff. Looking forward to talking about some prospects. Looking forward to being positive about the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah.
Let's not get carried away. So
Well, let me just insert really quick. Third draft in a row for me where I felt positive. Relative to, how the draft went. But yeah.
And that isn't blind positivity, and I guess we'll get to it down the line. But
It was earned.
Exactly, it's earned. We'll get to it down the line, but in the past drafts, there seems to be a theme emerging, I'd say, of their past drafting. But before that, Coby Bryant was the first guy we haven't talked about yet out of Cincinnati, cornerback, and someone who in round 4, people were kind of surprised that he was still there because he won the Jim Thorpe Award, given to the best DB of college football, won that in 2021, so last season. And the reason he was there is he didn't test well at all. He's the least athletic cornerback they've ever drafted in the John Schneider, Pete Carroll era. He doesn't have 32-inch arms. He didn't run that fast. I think he improved to a 4.47 seconds 40-yard dash, but he's just not very athletic. He's not really the small cornerback comp because he's still almost 6'1", but he doesn't have the kind of burst or twitch that the small cornerback mold has either. He's just a guy who can cover and is sticky. Griff, did you watch him?
Only when watching Gardner. And
Right.
I was conscious of him and I didn't really dive into it. I just thought, okay, that other guy's good too. But I wasn't really trying to parse why or when, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I was kind of surprised by the pick when I heard the name.
Yeah. It didn't feel that Seahawky, but it's kind of nice that they're but then you sort of realize how competitive Bryant is. So he clearly is from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice that they've taken someone who can just cover. So it is kind of a what is the ceiling question mark, but also he can cover, right? Can someone cover? Can he run fast enough? I think he can. Can he cover? Yes. And he's in phase on a lot of the plays that I've seen. Need to dive into him a bit more. But it was interesting as well in his draft call with defensive backs coach Kyle Scott. Really, really seemed like they had a good relationship. Maybe a Scott-influenced pick. Seems throughout the draft, the positional coaches and other coaches had input, which was noticeable on video. I'm sure they have input every year, but yeah.
So the note on Bryant has been he's a gamer, right? And you just talked about the athleticism. Would you say that's accurate? He's just a gamer.
Yeah, and to that point, Ty, I mean, metrics-wise, Sports Info Solutions, he had 4.1 total points per game, which tied 8th best. He had 1.8 pass breakups per game, which tied 5th best. This is out of all of the cornerbacks in the draft class. So, he has production on the ball, which shows up in that kind of deal as well. Did get thrown out a lot because of Source, so...
Right. That's a really good point. And he held up well against
and on that theme, right,
too.
What was the thing with Trey Brown? He had so many coverage snaps on tape, like playing in that Oklahoma defense, the Big 12, air it out deal, but also they went at him. Teams weren't scared to. He got beat sometimes. He also covered a lot of reps and he's seen a lot of stuff. In the NFL, you look at Bryant, where instead of having to defend 20 targets a game, that's probably a bit extreme, but 20 targets a game, he's having to defend 5, and he has a more NFL hashes, less of space of like being out on the field, because
Sure.
he mainly
Yeah.
aligned to the field and Sauce mainly to the boundary. Suddenly, everything gets a bit more almost easier on him. So he's had a baptism of fire. So, and again, great experience.
And by virtue of playing at Cincinnati, he played a lot of man coverage, and that's obviously Seattle's going to be building up that package quite a bit this year.
Yeah, I mean, he played press, aligned in press, 33% of snaps, which was the 11th most out of the class.
And how did you feel about his technique, especially
Well,
relative to other guys?
this is where the numbers can't protect me, and where I have to say I have not watched enough of him. But based off the little bits I've seen, there's the 2-1 to none with the arms deal, which Seattle likes. I'd imagine he's more of a mirror guy, though. The other thing I need to watch is the Senior Bowl stuff again, because he was there, the one-on-one drills. Maybe I'll do a cut up of that and put it on my YouTube. But he, like, I have watched that film previously, and I wasn't that. He didn't stand out, let's say, but everyone had a bad day. So
okay. Interesting.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing too, right? Like, you have said multiple times that you did not like the cornerbacks at all, the entire group at the Senior Bowl, and now both of the guys that they took were from that group. So, I guess, how are you feeling just going off of that?
Well, that's a surface level take, but it's fine.
Right.
Like, and also you can kind of see why through what I've said about Bryant, and then the next guy, Tariq Woolen, 4th round pick, fifth round pick, sorry,
fifth rounder,
out of Utsa, the Roadrunners. He's you can see why that's a thing as well. Like, I was saying Woolen maybe could go kind of 2nd round, 3rd round because of how well he tested. But then you look at him at the scene, and I mean, just to be clear, right? His testing is nuts. He's like, apart from his agility drills at his pro day, but all the rest of it, he was 6'4", 205 pounds, 33 5/8 inch long arms. So he's that tall cornerback mold for the Seahawks. 4.26 seconds 40, 1.49 seconds 10-yard split, 42-inch vertical jump. So these are all like upper percent, like 97th, 99th, 92nd, 97th percentile kind of figures, right? Then at his pro day, he jumped a 131-inch broad jump, which again, that's just stupid. So I was saying maybe this kind of level of guy, athlete-wise, athletic gifts would go 2nd round, maybe. I mean, Efetu Melifonwu, he went in the 3rd round, I believe, to the Lions. Maybe 2nd, but he was a similar comp because he coming out of Syracuse. He was almost as athletic, but still not quite. But the fact Woolen's a converted wide receiver, he, at the Senior Bowl ties, as you alluded to, he didn't really impress me. Griff, have you seen anything from him?
No, I have not. So I can't offer anything more. We'll have to dig in more. But Pete really did hammer home how athletic he was, especially for a guy at his build too. Like the 7.13 cone at that height is insane, especially how fast he is in a straight line. Because a lot of those guys, I feel like the high cut guys that are fast in a straight line, it almost reinforces having less agility the faster you are. I don't know if that's a mental thing or whatever. Like, they just don't think they need it because at certain levels of football, it just doesn't matter just because the size and speed is what it is, the straight line speed. But the fact that he has a 7.13 cone at 6'4" is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it in those terms.
So
and I would say if you watch the tape, you know, when he's overlapping, so midpointing, and he's asked to sort of burst on 2 up the seam, he has real burst out of his breaks to reach, which is some agility. And he doesn't look like he's that tall.
Oh, really? Oh, that's a good sign then. Just traits wise. So to your point about how developmental he feels, I mean, it really felt like a developmental pick. Like, they're going to invest in this guy over the course of 2-3 seasons and see what's there. Because right now Seattle has, options at corner. He does not need to be the guy right now. If he is, awesome, and he rises to the top, awesome. But Seattle rostered so many corners, and they brought back Sidney Jones, and Trey Brown is there. Obviously, health concerns there and stuff, but there's no pressure on him. So maybe they knew what they were getting into with this guy by virtue of the rest of the roster.
Yeah, and Bryant is most similar to like a Lyndon Stevens. Who else? Hold on 1 second. Sorry. And Mike Tyson as well. They also drafted out of Cincinnati, but he is kind of in that Sidney Jones era, mold as well. Jones is more athletic, but the kind of tweener type, not small, not long, but the tweener mold. So he's way more likely to play. Come say week 1. Woolen is. There's a reason they took Bryant ahead of Woolen, right? And there's a reason Woolen fell this far. Like, one thing I saw very briefly on his tape was a few weird like effort things, but I don't know if it was a lack of effort or maybe a lack of confidence in technique, which was odd. And then his press like it showed up at the Senior Bowl one-on-ones, but also showed up on his college tape. His press, he's like, and it speaks to them wanting to harness him as a project and develop him and build him up. His press technique, he aligned inside, which that's conventional. And then he uses his inside foot and fires it forward, gets it moving as like a pivot foot, right? Now, if you're doing that and you're then having to transition to an outside release route, you're playing catch up because your first step has been with your inside foot and you've got an outside release. So the receiver has 2 extra steps on you for you to get outside. So often he ain't getting his hands on at the line of scrimmage, or he's getting one on and he's having to really fight to get back in phase with the outside release vertical route. He's basically out of phase and relying on his speed to run back with guys. Now, in the Roadrunners Conference, that occasionally worked, although it didn't all the time, especially against the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, right? And Zappy. I think it was Zappy there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But where this didn't work at all was at the Senior Bowl. He just got ran past every time. And it's like, I see that as a DB guy. Pete Carroll will see that as a DB guy. And he'll be like, do you know what? If we just teach him how to step kick, like if we just teach him to step with his outside foot, put 2 arms on the guy, if he's outside the frame, transition 2 to 1 to none, teach him all these sort of stuff, actually utilize his hands. Don't put him in a bad position out of phase. Let him play more in phase. We might have something, but that takes time. The patience will take time as well. So he's a real project, right? But
yeah, and they did take him in the 5th round.
Yeah, and that feels like really good value for him too, right? Because he was getting buzz where it was like, this guy might play his way into the 1st round, or when there was a lot of buzz about more so more realistically, more objectively, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round. So to get him like mid 5th round, because at that point in the draft, that's when you start taking shots. That's when you kind of just start taking shots and seeing what sticks. And I mean, that's a pretty darn good investment considering what kind of athlete he is. And then if he doesn't end up being anything, you use the 5th round pick.
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
So someone you will have watched more of, Griff, is the next guy, 5th round pick, edge defender Tyreke Smith out of Ohio State.
Yeah. Tyreke Smith. So a long line of OSU defensive ends that go like top 10 and stuff, Nick Bosa, obviously. Well, both Bosa brothers, Chase Young. And then the next batch of ends that OSU has are 2 guys, Tyreke Smith and Zach Harrison. Zach Harrison did not come out this year, didn't declare. But then these 2 guys are way, way less athletic, working with way less, but they're also really skilled like those guys. So who Tyreke Smith is specifically is he's not an athlete. He did not test well. He actually did have a okay 3-cone. That actually shows up on tape. That's kind of how he plays. He does not blow off the line. He doesn't get depth on the tackle. He has to work for his angles, but he knows exactly what he's doing and why he's doing it. I mean, he's like he's like an expert at rushing the passer. He's very good at it. It's just the traits bring him down many, many notches compared to high-level guys. But so what his deal is, what he needs to be in the NFL to get the most out of him is when he's in there, and Seattle will be a rotational team at edge, at outside linebacker, or defensive end, depending on the front. But when he gets in there, have him be the depth guy for passing situations. I mean, you can have him be like a rotational guy for early down stuff where the outside linebacker has to do everything. But I think to start rookie year, just let him tee off where he knows the ball is going to be thrown and let him just keep pass so that he can work his get off and timing with the snap because he needs all the help he can get. He is a good snap jumper. He knows when the ball is going to be snapped so that he can get as much of an advantage on the tackle as he can, because when he gets high on the tackle, as in downfield, I mean, he's got every move in the book. I mean, he's so fast with his hands. He knows how to use his feet to shorten the tackle set so that he can get to the outside on them more. He's got okay power for a guy that can go speed to power. I mean, they said he had a basketball background, but he looks, and I know I've made that analogy a lot this draft season with Charles Cross and stuff, but they drafted some hoopers because like he literally looks like the way he attacks and can like dip his shoulder and just like all this like reactive athleticism, like just reacting to stimulus. It reminds you of a guard driving to the hoop with a guy defending him. Like he looks like if you CGI'd in a basketball with his outside hand when he's rushing the outside track on tackles, it looks like he's driving to the hoop and he's just finding a way, no matter what the angles are, no matter how he comes off the line, no matter what like initial rush path he takes. He just finds the path of least resistance or manufactures it with his footwork. So he's a very fun player to watch. Strong through contact, bend through contact is there. He's good at, torquing getting the hips through, the toes through. So all that is there. He's just not very fast.
Yeah.
Pro Football Focus had a really high win rate for him. That makes sense. Now, wins don't always translate to pressure. But
well,
the amount of time
on the pressure point, right? On the pressure point, he had a 13% pressure percentage,
which is
per Sports Info Solutions, which tied 18th with Boye Mafe. So
there you have it. And we'll get into Mafe more. But yeah, so he's got a toolkit. He's fun to watch. People will like him. I say just let him be in the 4 down stuff. Let him be one of the first guys off the bench. Just let him rush. But I think they got really good value too. He could have gone in the 3rd or 4th round.
Well, the basketball analogy, he's kind of like when he's crashing into the paint, right? He just he'd more than likely be kicking it back out, right? He doesn't really have that speed to win whatever. Anyway, but I agree, and interestingly, he was a name pre-draft who we talked about, and he met like these aren't hard and fast, and they're not actually, they're kind of source numbers, but there's kind of some guesswork on my end as well. But he would have met their edge prototype numbers other than his 40. Like he's got longer than 33-inch arms. He's he had a 1.65 seconds 10-yard split. He's like sort of mid percentile kind of athlete across the board. The issue was that 4.86 seconds 40-yard dash, and more importantly, shows up on the tape. But I love that basketball thing again because watching the Senior Bowl one-on-ones, you really did see that. And he's also a high motor player. And I think I haven't gone back and checked, but I swear he was their Sam linebacker in 2020. Maybe it was because of the playoff against Clemson, but I swear he was playing out in space as like a reroute curl flat over number 2. But the way Pete Carroll spoke about him, and I doubt Pete Carroll has watched much of his stuff, but the way Pete Carroll spoke about him, it was like he was just a pure out-and-out rusher. It's quite funny. Also, Carroll was like, when they drafted Mafe, he was like, we want him to keep coming, like attacking forward, rushing the passer, right? Then when they draft Smith, Carroll was like, yeah, Mafe is more of a linebacker. Like he can do a bit more coverage. Smith's more of a D end, but it's very lost in how you talk to the media, isn't it?
I think it's tough because I think the way I perceive that is that because they want Mafe, they drafted him in the 2nd round. He was their 2nd pick. They want him to be the guy, and if you're going to be the guy down the road, that means you're going to be a 3-down player. Right. If you're going to be a 3-down player, that means you're also playing in base outside linebacker, where you're asked to do, like you said, all 3: rush, drop, and set the edge. If you're just more of an end guy, and Pete talked about like their 4-down packages and stuff, even in that topic, I mean, that to me just screams Tyreke Smith is just like a depth pass rusher. Like that's just what all they're wanting from him. And he's a fifth round pick. Now we might see him in there in base because they'll be circling guys in and out anyway. But yeah, so I think it's more just like they're gonna want Mafi to be doing it, or Mafe, I think is how you pronounce it. Or Mafe. Pete said Mafe.
Yeah, I like that.
They're going to be having him do everything.
You'd expect well, actually, no. Anyway, but to finish the point on the Smith thing in terms of his college, like, Ohio State was literally running until they fired their coaching staff on defense. They were literally running the same defense as the Seahawks, same terminology, same techniques, kind of watered down in a sense, but same kind of 4-3 deal of like, this is the exact same defense. So that will help him as well. He'll probably get to Seattle and be like, oh, this is the same language. Unless he's been caught in between and Seattle is changing their whole language. But that would surprise me. Yeah, they're shifting a bit, but I still think they'll use similar terms. Maybe not, but
maybe a combination. I mean,
yeah. So next up, Bo Melton out of Rutgers. And Griff, I know that you've watched a bit of him as well. I just know that Rutgers is a challenging spot. He's from a Rutgers family, so it kind of makes sense. I respect that he went there.
So he's a fifth-year senior at Rutgers. They don't throw the ball a lot, like very, very little. From a like tangible, from like the things that translate to like pedigree that translate to the NFL, usually like the correlations you see, like this is looking at it like it's looking at it retrospectively. It's not like looking what what a prospect actually is, but like the correlations, the endpoints that are there are usually like target share, and there are production metrics,
right?
And then of course combine testing and stuff. And then you look at Melton, you're like, you see the raw yardage, 400 yards, 400, 700. You're like, 700 yards as a fifth-year senior. But then you look at how much Rutgers throws the ball, and then you look at his target share relative to the offense. In a vein, he literally was the passing offense.
And well, I have his target share down at 25%, which tied 17th.
Which is, that's pretty damn high for all of college football, Division I.
Yeah.
So like that's a good sign. So like actually, I wouldn't sink him outright on the yardage of like, could he be anything? Because we're still talking about a seventh rounder. But if he was drafted in the for whatever reason, drafted in the fourth round or fifth round, and then you're just looking at the production part, like that's the qualifier I would offer. It's just the offense he was in, and the fact that he had a high target share. I think that's a good sign. But so he tested well, and he had a blazing 40, like a sub 4.4 40. I don't know if he's quite that fast on tape, but he's still a legit 4.4 guy if he's not a 4.34 guy. And he had his combine 3 cone was like 6.98. Then his pro day 3 cone was 6.81. You look at his frame. He's like, what is he? 5'11", 6 foot, 200.
5'10".
Oh, he's only
5'10", 189 pounds, but 18 reps on the bench.
So what I get from this pick, and I know you can't read too much into 7th round picks, but what I get from this pick is
it's fun. What are we doing here if we're not going to do that?
Right. Yeah. But so you get the vibe that they're and Seattle's drafted that height profile before, don't get me wrong, but watching him play, like he has all the traits he has all the physical traits to be a good route runner. He's just unrefined. I know like unrefined 5th-year player, like is that, but again, the coaching staff at Rutgers probably wasn't investing a lot in him, and the route tree that they had him run, like they didn't need a lot, there. So it just makes you think like they're going after skill sets that Waldron had in Los Angeles, and that's exciting.
His testing profile is fairly similar to Tyler Lockett, and it's actually even more similar to Doug Baldwin, apart from Baldwin's 3 cone was 6.56 seconds, so like crazy good. But other than that, they're very, very similar players. And then if you think about Lockett, I guess, because coming out, it was uncertain whether Lockett was an outside dude or an inside dude. But also Baldwin, who could align outside, but was mainly a slot, right? Especially his career transitioned. Like Melton's production, like his EPA, so his receiving total points per game out of the slot and his receiving total points per game out wide both was 0.5 each. So his production was very split down.
Yeah. You think about a lot of trying to fit him into Seattle's current offense. Well, one, we don't know exactly what the offense will be because we're coming off having Russell Wilson and coming into having either Drew Lock or Geno Smith, and with an offensive coordinator that did something very different in his previous stop than he did with his first year in Seattle. So it's a jury's out on what the actual offense will look like. But if they lean further into like the under center reduced splits and stuff, the reduced splits make it really hard on cornerbacks in the NFL with divider leverage and everything they play off. I mean, it kind of manufactures separation for them just by alignment.
Melton, you're not going to get in a reduced split when you've got a partner next to you. You're going to get outside leverage off. You're not going to get press. Right. You might get press outside leverage if it's cover 2, but then it's cover 2, right? Like you cannot play inside leverage to like 2 receivers in a reduced split. You just can't do it, and you can't play inside. You just particularly can't play inside press. So, like you said, it just creates room, and the two-way go of creates room in that sense, but it also creates the two-way go of where you're condensed down. So now you've got the sideline to work with. Yeah.
So, like for a guy that is raw but has all the traits, he's coming to a scheme where it kind of has like training wheels to start. Like just like speed cut in breakers, like you don't have to break that off super square and leave a quarter in the dust. You kind of already have the advantage coming off play action. So I don't know. He could just be a guy that can be in the rotation of skill sets like Lockett and Eskridge, and we'll see what Eskridge has in him. Of those little 5'10" to 6 foot guys that the Rams had going over the middle, catching dig routes and crossing routes and stuff. So,
did he carry the football much, Griffin? Just thinking the immediate contribution is to give him some trendy fly sweeps, right?
Yeah, he's good after the catch, and if he has he's not necessarily a tackle breaker, but I would imagine that translates. Ty, do you have anything there?
He had 25 career rushing attempts, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. I know that they lined him up in the backfield a little bit, like on shotgun plays. And they did some jet sweep stuff with him, but like I said, it was only 25 attempts over 5 seasons. Yeah, 5 seasons.
So his ability as a return man probably translates.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about it. 4.34 seconds, 40-yard dash, which is 94th percentile, and a 38-inch vertical jump, which is 80th percentile. So there's burst as well in his testing.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys mentioned it already, but like there's a pretty good shot that, I would say that he has an advantage over most of the receivers on the back end of the roster in terms of making it, because the special team stuff is already ingrained in him. He's a really good gunner. He's got return capabilities. He's done both punts and kicks. So there's a lot of different ways that he can contribute and kind of prove his worth this summer.
Well, the other interesting thing is he's going to be turning 23, because when you talk about someone who's a 5-year whatever, you think they're going to be 25 rookie. Yeah. So that surprised me actually. Okay, so the final pick, Tariq Young out of Lenoir Rhine. Did I pronounce that right, or is it Lenoir Rhine?
Lenoir.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lenoir.
Is that how you bastardize it?
I like the more French pronunciation.
Lenoir. Rhine. Yeah.
But then is Rhine German though?
Well, but then it's spelt wrong if it's German.
Right, it'd be an I, not a Y.
Right, but then maybe they've Americanized the spelling of it to avoid not being American. Shock horror.
Right. Well, yeah, because after World War I, like German language was stigmatized and everything.
And there's a lot of Germans in.
Did you know how I read some crazy stat? There's an absurd number of German as a first language speakers in America circa 1914. Like
Yeah,
a crazy percentage, especially I think
I'm pretty sure they had a vote on whether the official language of the US should be German.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, Tariq Young is
Tariq Young is not German. We know that,
but he is a scholar, right? He
Hey, the Seahawks are going to Germany.
Yeah, he's crazy educated, right?
Yeah, but he should have probably looked that up. Pete Carroll mentioned how he's clever and he maybe a master's.
I think he's like an engineer or something. I think.
Yeah.
So he didn't major in the German language. Oh.
No.
Or the French language, as it turns out.
So
he's a crazy athlete, man.
Yeah, because I was thinking I kind of went on the old math bomb RAS comparison thing. And I was thinking, like, if Melton's like a Lockett Baldwin type, like Tariq Young is kind of baby DK, right? Like they're not the same.
3-cone though.
Pardon?
The 3-cone.
Oh yeah, but his 3-cone is actually good. Like 6.88 seconds 3-cone at 6'2", 224 pounds is nuts.
Yeah. He's pretty ridiculous. So Griff and I were talking about this before we hopped on the show that he there's a lot of like conflicting information about his last 3 years online. There's like you'll go on one page and it says that the last time he played was 2019. Then you'll go on another page and it shows the stats from the last 3 years. Then you'll go on another page and it shows stats from the last 2 years. And it's like, it's really confusing, but he did play this past year. Can confirm. And basically what I've grasped, obviously, because there isn't a lot of footage out there of him. So what I've grasped from third party sources is that he was very clearly too overpowered for the level of competition that he played in.
Yeah, so his transition is going to be interesting. The cool thing I saw was that they ran a wing tee, and so he was literally. And if you think about the origins of the play, like the fly sweep stuff, where they have a wing in the McVay offense and hand that off, that's the same deal, right? And he's carried the football quite a bit. Then they last year, I think they shifted their offense over to more pro style, conventional, whatever you want to call it, stuff, and sort of line him up more as a pure wide receiver. But his experience carrying the rock at that height, that sounds cool.
All right, so some clarity. Before World War I, German is the second most spoken language. So Shrine Bowl, though, is interesting, though. So we need to watch the Shrine Bowl to see like how his Division II, how his athleticism looks around, like to contextualize it against Division I players, and really see what that looks like. Just so we kind of know more, like from a projection standpoint, because otherwise, it's very David Moore-ish like pick, right? Like a guy nobody had heard from a really small school who had a crazy combine. What makes Tariq really interesting, though, is very few guys with that density have that 3-cone. A sub 6'9" 3-cone is crazy, man. At 6'2", 225, and at that speed. If a beggar could be a chooser, can he just be Quincy Enunwa? That'd be awesome. But he doesn't have to be Quincy Enunwa. He can be practice squad guy in all likelihood, year one. But hey, interesting stuff. Because right now the depth chart for Seattle's receiving room is locks are Lockett, Metcalf, Eskridge, Swain.
Is Swain a lock though?
I think so. Just because I think so. He may not be, but I think so. At least he's an established, legit NFL receiver. I don't know. So let's assume those four. Then after that is where it gets interesting. Penny Hart, he just seems to stick around. I don't know what he's doing in camp or practice that makes him exciting, but he's sticking around somehow. Ursua is probably not in the cards anymore. Cody Thompson might get a shot. And then we're getting into Melton and Tariq Young. So it's going to be pretty hot.
Young's another one who he's only going to
5 and
be
6.
He's only going to be 23 by the time it's week 1. So like, he's not going to be that old.
Part of the reason why these guys are so old is because of COVID giving them an extra year of eligibility. This is an older draft on average.
Yeah. There's also we know that they like Aaron Fuller and they brought back Cade Johnson. So there's
nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that are in that mix.
And then what happened to Weddington?
Weddington went to the Patriots practice squad last year. I don't know if he's still like with the organization or not.
Okay. Cade Johnson was a real receiver in college.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an actual receiver. It's just there's probably a lot of those guys that just don't stand out at anything that are like, bottom of the chart.
Weddington's with the 49ers now.
Oh, okay. I don't know. So that should make for an interesting camp battle. For those names just mentioned.
We need a further clarification of the German American discussion. Unfortunately, the late German academic Willie Paul Adams published a paper for Indiana University. Apparently, what I was saying about German potentially being adopted as language voted in by Congress is not accurate. Willie Paul Adams wrote, "Fascinating for Germans, this imagined decision has been popularized by German authors of travel literature since the 1840s and propagated by some American teachers of German and German teachers of English who are not entirely secure in their American history." So I apologize. Willie Paul Adams, he put it right in 1990. So yeah, I was wrong. It's a myth.
Interesting.
I'm a sucker.
And I wonder how much of that is like a white supremacist myth.
Yeah, well, there was something about this man called there's something about the guy who supposedly stopped this vote. A man called Muhlenberg, and how he was the hero who stopped the vote. Which didn't actually happen. So you might be on the right track there, Griffin, but we'll educate ourselves and return to the topic.
I'm exiting out of the Wikipedia on German language in the United States at the moment.
Okay, so
wait. Speaking of German, though, we're not done. We got a game in Germany.
Yes.
And the front office was learning German, ironically, too.
Yes.
And Aaron Donkor.
So it is all very related to the Seahawks.
Aaron Donkor is making the team, clearly.
Yeah, well, he has to. They can't cut. Exemption. That's a great point, because they can't cut him now. They can't get rid. They've got to keep him for as long as...
Yeah, the German Seahawkers might storm the field if they cut him.
Yeah.
They'll actually have to answer for that. They won't have a whole ocean parting them away from that fan base.
Back to the Seahawks.
The dust has settled, hasn't it? So how do you feel about the draft, Griff?
Yeah, so they clearly took the path where they did not bring back their quality starters at left tackle and right tackle in Dwayne Brown and Brandon Shell. Shell makes the most sense. They both make it. Both picks make sense at tackle. Both decisions and moving on makes sense. Shell makes the most sense in that, I mean, he wasn't staying healthy, and he was a very quality right tackle when he stayed healthy. He's also 30-31. Being able to replace him with theoretically equal play with potential on a rookie contract, and that guy's theoretically going to stay healthy, is like a win. Dwayne Brown, I mean, there's an argument to pay Dwayne. He can still play. He's still a franchise caliber left tackle, but it's the same thing on the other side. You're getting a future in Charles Cross, a guy who's going to be really good, and on a rookie contract, leaving you more flexible. One, for the moves they made this year to squeeze some guys under the cap, but then also for 2023, it just gives you more options. And then you don't have to go tackle next year, because however long Shell and Brown stuck around for, it wasn't going to be for that long. So they did the prudent thing. They took left tackle Charles Cross at 10. There weren't any alternatives at 10 or 9. I keep saying 10. They chose it and picked at 9, right?
They did, yeah.
Sorry.
Tim
There
was
were-
the original pick.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh man. So there weren't any alternatives there at 9 that made you go, oh, I wish I got that guy. The only realistic alternative option was trading back, and I think they did the smart thing taking Charles Cross. So that feels good. Boya Mafi is a good pick. It was Phil's need. He was probably the best edge remaining. The only other option that you could argue for taking there is Drake Jackson, and we'll see how those careers match up. Drake is the younger guy. They're both raw in their own ways. Some of them are refined in certain areas, or one of them is refined in certain areas, one of them isn't. But overall, they're both they'll need development. The really disappointing thing.
The reason you say is just before you get to the disappointment, which I really don't want to interrupt, but I have done now.
Yeah.
The reason they're the only two options, you say that right, is because they were they met all the height, weight, length, speed prototypes, right? Like a Benito, for instance, ain't that kind of level of
he's a guy. He doesn't check enough like tangible boxes to where you should probably take him to where Denver took him. I think it's probably
the
like
disappointment.
To the disappointment, the biggest bummer of this draft is that Ebiketie did not fall to them. He was the guy, I think, of that second tier of rushers. And in fact, I mean, I thought he was a first round pick, like easy first round pick. I was surprised he fell. And really after Thibodeau, he was the next best option at combining fit and need. Like, again, like I know I said 1,000 times, Karlaftis I would take in a heartbeat in the first and not think twice about fit. You just make it work. It's not like that'd be that hard. But Ebiketie was just too perfect.
I watched
he's better than Maffei.
I watched the Senior Bowl one-on-ones, and Ebiketie is like using his long arms. He's bending the edge, right? And he's able to shorten corners with bend, right? And then Maffei is like getting pushed around the arc, and his hips are stalling, and it's like, that sucks.
So the issue is, it's just another argument for like, I mean, nobody disagrees with this, but you have to watch the tape to really know how functional a guy's athleticism is. Because Maffei had an incredible combine, and if you really look for it, the traits are there on the field. Like you see him kind of fire out, and like him eat up steps. Like, okay, that's where the 10-yard split is. That's where the broad jump is and stuff. But he cannot maintain his speed while changing direction the way that Ebiketie can. Ebiketie is just smooth, like the term curvilinear. It looks like he's moving in a straight line even when he's turning direction, and he doesn't lose speed. Maffei, when he tries to corner, it's like a very exaggerated high effort move, which he actually, of all the areas, that's where he's the most refined in, are the actual moves in half man on the tackle when he's working the outside half of the tackle. It's just that once he wins and clears, he is like has to regain his speed, and he can do it, and he does regain his speed. And he has some reps where it's fine. He gets some pressures or hits or even some sacks doing that. It's just Ebiketie is just, that guy was just a no-brainer pick, and I'm shocked that he actually lasted that long. And I thought Seattle was going to get away with it. He kept falling, but Maffei still the next best option, and so in that vein, it's a good pick. Tyreke Smith is a great pick in the 5th round. We called him before the draft. He was like one of maybe 3 guys that we called like day 3 priority, because there are a lot of guys that are going to go day 3.
Well, and we should say as well that one of those guys that we said about Malone, I believe he went round 3. So
did he? Okay, so the guys that we mentioned were Enigbari.
Yeah, who Malone went later and I think had a medical thing, and his weight gain going from 250s to 270s, that scared some teams, I think.
That makes sense. And then Dominique Robinson, who I think I did know where he went, and then I didn't. And then it was Tyreke Smith, and then maybe Gunter.
Yeah, Robinson went in the 4th round, I believe.
Okay, so they all went roughly where we thought.
No, he didn't. He went in the 5th round. I lied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So outside of Malone, they were all day 3. I think did Gunter, did he go?
He was one of the last 7th round picks to Cincinnati.
So Seattle got one of those guys. If you're going to take anyone in the 5th round, take Tyreke Smith. So cool. He can actually rush the passer. Again, they need depth. He can actually do it. He can be a high pressure guy in the NFL. He's not going to get a lot of sacks, probably anywhere from 3 to 7 sacks a year, probably if he gets enough reps, but he'll get you pressure. So that's a good sign. And then they took corners to go and compete with who they have. So
yeah, the doubling up at the end on like unathletic, athletic cornerbacks, and then receiver doubling up with your mirrors is pretty cool.
yeah.
So you've avoided one pick, which is Kenneth Walker.
Well, that's right. We did, didn't we?
We kind of talked about him in the live recap, but we can talk about him in the future. But the real thing here is they needed a quarterback, right? But they didn't take a quarterback, and it does seem as though, based on Pete Carroll's comments today, as well on the 950 KGR with Ian Furness, that they're going to ride with Drew Lock, Geno Smith, Jacob Eason, Levi Lewis, who they added in undrafted free agency, and Caleb Ellaby, who got a camp invite. Lewis is fun. He's like if Kyler Murray is left-handed and not as fast, and that's really lazy because I'm sure there's many other differences, but he's short.
Yeah. So the one thing about the Walker pick is we
don't have to talk about it. I tried to move us on from it.
Yeah, no, I know. But the one thing I will say is that he did taking him in a vacuum, say what you will, but from a results perspective, because we can see how the draft went, he did not stop them from taking Lucas. And the alternatives there were not great from a value pick perspective and a need perspective. The only guy that would have excited me would have been Alec Pierce. And there's a redundancy there with Metcalf.
Yeah, so they were at a if you're thinking of immediate contributors, possibly they could have tried to get a center, right? But then the ledge had gone. The edge ledge, they could have doubled up and gone Drake Jackson, but that again,
that would have been
really.
It just doesn't really
make sense. It seems a bit over the top. The one thing we were wondering about live was maybe getting a corner like Andrew Booth, but he fell because of real sketchy medical stuff.
And like the other receivers, Mechie, like he's not gonna play for.
It was the spot where I think they took probably the best player available on their board, but also a trade down would have been nice to get you into like more of a value range and give you another pick in a bit later on. Yeah. Like, because if you'd had another pick, you could have got like a Tyndall or something like that. But anyway,
that's how you get your linebacker for this class.
Well, the one thing was like
right?
There were quite a few like off-ball linebackers available at that spot.
Yeah,
so that's
and
the
it happened to be early though.
Uh-huh.
Like they all kept falling. It was odd.
Yeah. But so the absence of them taking a linebacker when they could have speaks to what they think of Cody Barton.
Yeah.
And Pete and John's comments on him was just like with Locke, they were not blowing smoke. They sincerely believe that, or they're just trying to manifest and they're willing to see what they have there and then make the decisions after this offseason because Cody Barton only has a year left. So,
but how upset are you about no quarterback, Griff?
I was only upset because I really only thought one guy in this class is going to be good, and that's Desmond Ridder. I still understand the idea in taking Malik Willis and where he went is like best for him. Less pressure. He's going to be behind Tannehill for a year, probably, I don't know. My thing with Ridder is that I straight up thought he was a better prospect relative to where they came out than Mac Jones. If Mac Jones can go 15th overall in a quarterback-rich draft, why can't Ridder go in the first or second in a very quarterback-weak draft? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how I view it. There were reports that teams were still surprised the quarterbacks fell as much as they did. I just think part of it is that they know how quarterback-rich next year's draft is. So pretty much everybody's just saying, Carolina said it. Seattle clearly is saying it. We'll just wait till next year. and see what options we have now. Seattle rolling with Locke and Geno, it does mirror rolling with Tavares Jackson, and then seeing what they had in Charlie Whitehurst. But this doesn't, to me, indicate what they think about what they need at quarterback, because they moved on from Hasselbeck after 1 year. They moved on from Tavares Jackson after 1 year. So there's a clear willingness to see what they have, but they are going to be equally willing to say, all right, see ya after a bad or even mediocre year. If Drew Lock or Geno has a unexpected year, then unexpected good year, then they'll probably roll with those guys. That's the chance of that is slim, but they do have in the building Shane Waldron and Andy Dickerson, who are on a Rams team that saw a year 1 to year 2 jump with Jared Goff after a horrible rookie year. And eventually, that ran dry. There's an expiration date on the Jared Goff Rams offense, evidenced by the Stafford trade. But it speaks to the idea of anything can happen. Matt Hasselbeck, when Seattle traded for him, he was, a 6th-round pick and a backup behind Brett Favre in Green Bay. And then he was part of a 1st-round pick swap, a throw-in. And Holmgren turned him into as a fringe Pro Bowl, caliber quarterback. John Schneider talked about how it felt like, the Ron Wolf model was you develop quarterbacks, you do this, you see what's there. You see, they need time. Scott McLuhan on his podcast talked about, or I think a podcast appearance with Rob Statton talked about how you should just keep drafting quarterbacks and develop them and see what happens. So that's the principle here. I don't see Pete Carroll thinking he needs a game manager in the way that we view that term. I think he is just approaching quarterback the way literally most teams approach quarterback, the way Sean McVay approached quarterback when he came to Los Angeles. Develop the guys, see what's there. If not, then you have no better. There's going to be very few classes to fall into the year after a quarterback experiment than the one they're about to fall into next year if this doesn't work. So I really thought you could drop Desmond Ridder into this with the talent that I think they have and maybe have a functioning offense. They clearly didn't. So we'll see what happens with Drew Lock. Pete was adamant that he thought Drew Lock coming out of Missouri was better than Ridder, Pickett, Willis. So
he said today that he'd have been the first quarterback taken in the draft, in his opinion. The other thing at play here as well is if the competition's looking awful. Now, I agree. I think they are very willing to ride it out and give it a chance for a season, right? But if the competition's looking truly awful, there's 2 quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo, who else is going to get them? They're just out there, by the way, and their value's low. And
and by the way, I want to say that I don't buy into this thing that they're completely out on Mayfield. Because if it's true that, or if we can just read the tea leaves here and look around the league and see that, the Seahawks are very clearly the only team that really makes sense for him on some sort of level. Why would they, and they're really in a bidding war with themselves, why would they express interest? Why would they express any sort of maybe desperation to have him? It's more wise to just say, yeah, we're cool with Drew Lock and Geno Smith and just let the Browns deal with that and sit on that.
And I don't know how bad Cleveland's cap is if they don't trade Baker, but they have to kind of get him off. It should be at the stage where Cleveland's giving you a pick to take his contract on. Anyway.
Yeah, publicly, it doesn't. It only hurts them to express any sort of openness to a trade because they want them to come. Now, the other situation to monitor is all the drama that's going out in Nashville, Tennessee right now. Ryan Tannehill does not want to be a mentor to Malik Willis.
I don't know if you guys heard about that. Yeah,
his full quote was totally fine. He was like,
that got taken out of context, then clipped up some more to further remove it from context. So quote tweeted by certain players who didn't get the context.
Yeah,
and then replied to by other players who didn't get it. And then the podcast about it.
You could study that for a comms 101 class and be like, this is what clickbait does.
But also can you blame him? They just traded his number 1 receiver and then they drafted his replacement.
So there was also there are two data points here that I point to that make this fascinating. Because again, Ty, like you said, Pete, it does not help them to say that, well, we'll still kick around in the vet trade market. So two things. There was a report that Tannehill did not know they were going to draft a quarterback. So there's that. There's the other one that, per Adam Schefter, reputable. So, well, sometimes these days, that the Titans were tried to make a trade for Aaron Rodgers. They tried to make that happen. That means Tannehill probably goes to Green Bay in that scenario, I would think. To me, that just demonstrates that Tennessee is like they're trying. I mean, between the draft pick of Malik Willis and that report, those two reports, they are trying to move on from him at some point. The problem, though, is his contract is just simply more tradable next year. And same for Kirk Cousins and same for Derek Carr. Like if there's the only vet quarterbacks that actually make you feel like, all right, Seattle can maybe squeak into the wild card with this team if everywhere else on the roster goes well, are those guys. Their contracts are easier to acquire next year. So it's just the draft is better next year. The vet quarterback market is better next year. The vet quarterback market can be the fallback plan for the draft not going how you want, or you're not getting the picks to move up the way you want. So it's just not going to happen this year. So it's Drew Lock, it's Geno Smith. I'm not mad. I'm not coping. We're at the acceptance stage, but actually, Ryan Tannehill's
Doesn't
on the
sound
market, so
like
maybe
acceptance.
it does happen.
Doesn't sound like acceptance right now, pal.
Yeah.
I've got to be honest. But anyway,
the lies we tell ourselves.
right.
I'm already at the point now where I've convinced myself that Drew Lock is leading the Seahawks to 11-6 in a wild card.
Well, if
There
you
you go.
replace Geno Smith with Drew Lock, then I'm on board. So
Or
the other
Geno,
thing
yeah.
with this draft is there's a kind of narrative emerging that the Seahawks, because of Arif Hassan's consensus big board, which is a really great tool, which sort of amalgamates, the consensus from draft experts, then compares that with how the league drafted, who reached or perceived reach on a player. And because the Seahawks matched that this year, and also because it kind of drafted, barring kind of Walker, but they kind of drafted how everyone wanted them to for like need, right? There's a consensus that they stopped being so weird and they drafted differently. Do you buy into that, Griff? Is that narrative real or not?
Yeah, I think by virtue of being higher in each round, it's harder to stray from consensus because there's a little bit more universal agreement on those guys.
The guys
And
you like are still there, so you don't get forced into like a Collier situation where it's like, oh my gosh, everyone who we liked has gone because we're at the bottom of a tier.
Right. And then also Sean Clement said, like, mathematically, just the way that like those Sean Clement is great guy, data analyst, has worked with teams and stuff. He chimed in on Twitter and said that, yeah, like mathematically it's harder to not pick consensus higher up because if you do a good pick, then you're not like on the positive side, then you're right where the consensus is. Whereas I'm explaining this terribly. Whereas if it's what am I saying? Anyway, it's harder to stray from consensus. I'm tired. I don't remember exactly what he said.
There you go.
There you go.
It was
Boom.
probably a lot
Thanks, Gavel.
smarter. Yeah.
It was so much smarter because he is so much smarter than me.
Okay,
But then also part of it is that like this is not a shift in focus or anything. It's just their team building relative to where their needs were. They lost their franchise left tackle, so they drafted a new one. The last time they didn't have a franchise left tackle and they were picking top 10, they drafted Russell Okung, and he was widely regarded as a very good left tackle. And sure enough, outside of some injuries, he was a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle for them. And then they tried to do the George Fant experiment, which ironically is paying off now with the Jets. They quickly moved off not having a good left tackle in 2016 and traded for Dwayne Brown. And then they had 5-6 years of quality left tackle play. So, and now they're doing it again. So this is very similar for them. And then the Abraham Lucas pick, what's special about him is that he's probably the best prospect right tackle they've drafted, but they've drafted right tackle heavily. They drafted 3 right tackles, I think, between Carpenter, Fetty, and Justin Britt. None of those worked out. Carpenter was an okay guard. after being converted.
Lucas's testing profile is crazy. Like his tape pushed him down, I think, to third round, but his athleticism is unbelievable.
And neither of them are actually bad run blocking. They're just not great at it. I'd say actually Cross is good. He's a good run blocker, just not asked to do very much of it. But Pete emphasized how important it is for the tackles to be able to protect, especially at left tackle, in his deal today with KJR. So that's a premium to them. And I also assume that this was at the behest or fulfilling the wishes of their offensive assistants, Waldron and Dickerson. So we can assume that everyone's on the same page with acquisition. Like we know that they deferred to Tom Cable previously. So, I mean, that's not new to them. They've always tried to draft who their guys want, but I don't know if they're leaning all the way into Waldron's offense, which is really not that far off from what Pete Carroll has done historically, dating all the way back to Drew Bledsoe in New England. I don't know. It's cool. It's cool that they're going all in on it and that they're trying to let their offensive coordinators cook, so to speak, with the type of guys they want. Remember we were all upset that they didn't draft Creed Humphrey last year, which I understand. But the reason why they didn't was because their offensive coordinator wanted a third receiver, 3 threats in his own words.
And look at
Eskridge fits the skill set.
Look at the offensive coordinator and what the Rams do at center and stuff. Like
they cycle in and out.
They clearly don't value that in terms of a high pick.
Sullivan, Blythe,
right? They just need they want a smart guy who can get out in space a bit.
And further to the point, there are like 5 centers in the league that can actually block people one-on-one. Yeah. The average center is like 300 pounds flat.
Yeah.
And there's very few of them that are actually good. Like BJ Finney was not a good one-on-one blocker, but his tape with the Steelers was like he's always sliding to the right spot. He's getting good angles, good leverage. He's kind of like a cheerleader for the guard in a way, setting protections. Run blocking is adequate if the guard can really take on most of the work. So I thought, okay, that's a degree of stability Seattle hasn't had yet at that point in time. And then, of course, he didn't make the team. But like BJ Finney is not working with any more tools than Brian Allen or Austin Blythe is. And Blythe might actually have more to him. So, and the Chiefs thought Blythe was good enough to play for them until they drafted, Creed Humphrey in the second.
Yeah.
And hit. So,
as to the consensus thing, I want to take you back to your comments at the start of the podcast, where you said about, you've liked the past 3 drafts. Well, to me, the past 3 drafts have had a theme of they're just taking the guy who is the best on their board, and he does fit a need too, but they're taking a good player, right? Like the Jordan Brooks pick started that all off, where they maybe weren't able to trade down, but at the end of the day, they ended up with Brooks, and he was a great player. The tape looked great, and we watched the tape, and we're like, yeah, this makes sense. Same deal with 2021 was a bit funky, but it made sense from a needs perspective, and also you could clearly see the fit. Like there was an alignment of this player is going to do this in the offense with Eskridge, Trey Brown. You could see how that made sense with the new cornerback. There was no like bizarre thing. It felt like they got the guys that they wanted rather than like having to force something or talk themselves into something being a fit when it wasn't really.
Right. And even Forsyth, granted a 6th-round pick, but stylistically,
100%, yeah.
That's what the Rams tackles were.
You think about this year, Cross just makes so much sense, right? Walker, you could say he's the best player available. They need to run the ball well. They can't afford for their run game to have too much of a regression this year,
and
particularly their run action. And he's the most explosive back when you combine testing and advanced metrics in the entire draft. So
and they're just rostering running back the way McVay's rostered running back. I mean, they paid Gurley, they drafted Akers, they traded for Sony Michel, or did they sign him?
They traded for him. They
traded for him. So, and probably not for a high pick, but like they always want a guy there. And the thing is, the Rams do run a lot. It's just they like to run, after they've established a lead. But it's still a huge part of their game because they spend so much time in under center that's where most of those run attempts are coming from. Even in early down and early in the game, the meat of the game, like those attempts matter. Also, where Gurley really separated himself was as a receiver, screens and part of the passing game when they go into gun, and you
They
can't
split him out and empty him through him
even
screens.
dump offs, and like the back is a huge part of the progression for a lot of this stuff, like as an outlet, like it's 1-2 back, 1-2 tight end as the outlet. So, but you cannot get those targets without him being on the field, and he can't be on the field without getting the carries. So Walker didn't do a lot of pass catching at Michigan State or Wake Forest, right? Is that where he was before then?
Yeah.
But everything in his skill set, he's a quick starter, sharp cut. I mean, you can imagine just like you could with Gurley. He could be a difference maker in that sense. And while running back targets, the efficiency is what it is, like superficially, you have to remember that, or myself, that those targets are coming as an alternative to a sack or a throwaway, or an incompletion if forcing a ball that isn't there downfield. So, I mean, Gurley's yards per target were pretty crazy in 17 and 18. So hopefully they can get something out of that. The other thing is this probably stops them from trying to pay Penny next year, in all likelihood. So they can keep their position cheap. And then also we'll see what Josh Johnson has, if he can kind of be the number 2 in 2023. I don't know what's going to go on with Carson. Hopefully he can play football still, but
at least he got some money. Hopefully he keeps getting his money. I don't know how that works, but So, but on the macro scale, right? You'd agree that it's a continuation of the kind of getting good. It's been a 3-year thing. It hasn't just suddenly been. I don't know whether it had been conscious or not. They might have had an internal review. We don't know. But even like the Tariq Woolen pick, where he's like fallen this far. You're like, do you know what? Let's just take this traitsy corner who like fits our. It kind of reminds me of DK Metcalf, right? Where DK's still out there, late second round. Did they need that at the time? Kind of, but they just went, let's just do it now. He's fallen far enough. It seems like they're getting better value. And the Brooks consensus, for instance, that seemed completely wrong. Like when we watched the tape,
it's pretty clear what happened though. Because he went from being asked to cover a lot to all of a sudden not being asked to cover a lot.
Yeah,
that's all that happened.
People just weren't able to watch enough tape to actually find the proper value of him. And then he didn't play at the Senior Bowl, so no one knew.
And he just got an All-Pro vote for the wrong reasons. He should have got an All-Pro vote for being one of the best all-around linebackers in the NFL, and then, not because of his tackle count, but
the tape that Darryl Taylor, that was another one where if he wasn't hurt, like he'd have been a first-round pick, right? But the consensus doesn't catch up to that because he's hurt, and they also are sort of wondering about his tape, and then they don't get to see him at the Senior Bowl destroying people, basically. And then the medical causes him to slide.
Which, I mean, his first year of action, 6.5 sacks. The way he wins translates to winning that way so much more.
Yeah.
And so you could see the development toward the end of the year with the handwork. So, like,
I really don't think that Seattle's changed.
I don't either. They're just
I just think it happens
to
have matched up for the reasons we've outlined.
It's roster and how the draft falls, and also from a value perspective, because some people said, they took high premium positions, right? Well, the late 20s is where you should be taking linebackers if you need a linebacker and there's a first-round caliber linebacker. I mean, we're talking the late 20s. That's permissible. That should be socially acceptable. I think unless you get the Patrick Willis or Luke Kuechly coming out prospect where everyone agrees this guy's going to be a future All-Pro, which that line of thinking can be flawed too, because there have been top 15, top 20 linebackers taken recently, and their 5th-round options are not being picked up. But if you're convinced of your eval on the guy, and he's there in the late 20s, take him. It's like linebackers are very valuable. If you have a guy, a 240 pounder that can carry a seam route, then that means you can do so many more things with your safeties, etc. You can be more versatile, more flexible. There's hidden value there in that flexibility. It's not always going to be captured in any given snap. It's what you do over the course of a series, over the course of a game. Anyway, ranting now. Yeah, I agree with you. They're just responding to how the draft falls, their need. It's and the fact that they're picking at 9 in each round instead of late 20s.
So there we go. Any other closing thoughts?
Should we give out some grades?
No, I'm not doing that.
We
You can do
ask
grades, Kai.
A+.
I go B+, A- for this draft.
No, seriously though, I go B.
Okay.
And we'll see how we feel about the corners in a couple of years, because they could both, or one of them could find themselves starting.
I'm so excited for preseason football. Like preseason last year, we managed to get some of the illicit All-22, and it was fun seeing like these undrafted free agent guys ball out. Like Miles Adams, for instance, he was a star. Like wasn't an undrafted free agent. Well, he might have been once upon a time, but he was like added off waivers, I think, to the team. He was a star. Even was he Hewitt?
Gerard Hewitt or Jared
Hewitt.
Yeah,
he was all right on the interior as well. And now they've got more actual draft picks. Like, and they're going to be playing a lot of preseason football, and it's going to be there's like a competitive vibe where they're like they've doubled up at a lot of positions. There's some like four deep kind of looking things, which last year with only 3 picks, even with the undrafted free agents, they didn't seem to have as much. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I'll give the draft a C for that reason, a C grade, because they're out here competing.
I'm pretty excited to watch this receiver group for all the reasons that we mentioned, for all the names that we mentioned. I'm very excited to watch Tariq Young. I think that's like one of the big names to watch.
He'll be Casey Williams, and then he'll ball out and get caught.
Yeah,
and then
it's a big
Richard
preseason
Sherman of 2022 can tweet about it.
Yeah, it's a big season for Eskridge, or preseason for Eskridge too.
Yeah,
like we want to see it because Shane Waldron believes in him, we think so. And everything that he showed last year there were no negative signs. There were just very few.
No, he just got hurt.
He got hurt, missed out, and then Freddie Swain's the more reliable guy, and that's what it is. But yeah.
All right.
Cool. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks for listening. Please like, share it, retweet it, subscribe to my YouTube, follow these guys, more importantly, at Dane GNZLZ, at C Mike's Spin Move, and then at Matty F Brown. We appreciate you. We'll be back. We don't know when. Doing this weekly is quite fun. I think we should we'll aim for weekly, but obviously content wise, we might be a bit limited. We could do deep dives into people. We also have probably like a late wave of free agency and then camp storylines before the preseason, and we'll do an off-season Q&A, I think.
We could also probably get Griff to do like an hour and a half to 2 hours on Tannehill. Just Tannehill theories.
The Tannehill theories in German. Yeah.
Tanny leaks, we could call it.
Tanny leaks. Yeah. I like it.
Tannehill, is that German? Sounds not German.
Oh God, no, we're not going down this rabbit hole again.
It might have been like Tannehill.
Holy shit. The Tannehill family name first began to be used in the German state of Bavaria.
That's where they're going to play.
The plot thickens.
Tannehill's coming home. Week 10 against the Bucs.
To Wisconsin.
That's hilarious.
There we go.
All right.